I want to start today with a little test. I'm going to say a word, and I just want you, you listening to, notice what immediately pops into your head. Don't force anything. Just see what happens.
Okay, I'm ready.
Canary?
Okay. Yellow, bird, it sings, has wings, it's small.
Exactly. You didn't have to think about it. You didn't have to pull out your phone. It was just there, instantaneous. But the real question, and this is what drives the paper we're looking at today, is how? Where did that info come from? And how did your brain find it so fast?
It's a huge question when you really stop and think about it. We're talking about something called semantic memory.
Which is basically our internal encyclopedia.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's how you know a dog is a mammal, or what democracy means, or that a canary is a bird.
And it's really different from what we usually think of as memory, like remembering your wedding or where you left your car keys.
Crucial distinction, yes. That's the big split. Knowing the capital of France is Paris, that's semantic. But remembering the time you actually went to Paris and got soaked by the rain.
Yeah. That's episodic, your life story.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive into the encyclopedia part, using this really fascinating overview called semantic memory, from computational models to cognitive neuroscience, by Beth Ober and Gregory Schnott.
What I love about this reading is the journey it takes you on. It feels like a real detective story. You start in the 1960s with this idea that memory is just like a computer program.
Just abstract software.
And you end up in the 2000s looking at actual physical neurons in the brain, the hardware itself.
And it all starts with a guy who wasn't even a psychologist. He was a computer scientist, M. Ross Quillian.
This is back in 1966.
Right. So Quillian is working on his PhD in artificial intelligence. He's not trying to map the human brain. He's trying to build a program that can understand language. And he realizes, you can't just feed a computer a dictionary and expect it to think.
It needs a structure.
It needs a structure. So he built this model using what he called entries and bindings.
Okay, so entries are the concepts, like canary.
Right. That's the node. And then the bindings are the links. Canary is bound to yellow. Canary is bound to bird.
It sounds like a web. I mean, that's a metaphor we use all the time now.
It is, yeah. But Quillian's real genius was in describing how we move through that web. He called the process spreading activation.
I really liked his image for this, firing an activation sphere.
It's a great visual, isn't it? It's like a drop of ink hitting water. It just spreads out. You activate the canary node, and that energy ripples to bird, then to animal.
And the further out it goes, the weaker the signal gets.
Exactly. But this is where the computer model part really comes in, and where it starts to get a little controversial. He had this idea called cognitive economy.
Which is basically that the brain is lazy. It doesn't want to waste storage space.
Well, efficient, maybe.
In the 60s, computer memory was incredibly expensive. Every byte counted.
So his theory was that I don't actually have a little fact stored that says canary has skin. No, because that's not unique to canaries. It's a property of all animals. So to save space, the system stores has skin way up at the animal node.
So to answer the question, my brain has to do a search. It goes from canary up to bird up to animal, and then finds has skin.
That's the model.
Okay, hold on. That sounds efficient for storage, I get that. But it sounds incredibly slow for processing. You have to run this whole trace just for a simple fact.
That is the exact trade-off that the psychologist jumped on. They said, okay, if the brain really works like this, we should be able to measure a time delay. And it turns out they could.
Really?
Yeah. Quillian is basically right. It does take you a few milliseconds longer to verify a canary has skin versus a canary is yellow.
Wow, because yellow is stored right there locally, but skin is a commute up the hierarchy.
Precisely. So the model had some predictive power. But, like all these early theories, it was too rigid. Human memory just isn't that neat.
And that's when Endel Tulving enters the scene.
The giant of memory research. In 1972, Tulving steps in and says, look, you're all treating memory as one big monolithic thing. He's the one who really splits the atom, so to speak.
Between episodic and semantic.
Exactly. And he used these terms noetic and autonoetic, which sound a bit intimidating.
They do, yeah.
But the idea is really simple. Noetic is just knowing. It's semantic. It's impersonal knowledge. You just know it. Autonoetic, though, means self-knowing.
So that's the episodic part. You are placing yourself back in time.
You're mentally time-traveling, yes. So Quillian was only modeling the noetic part. And after Tulving, other researchers, like Collins and Loftus in '75, they started to loosen up Quillian's model.
How so?
They pointed out that some connections aren't logical, they're just associative. Like
Yeah.
fire and red are incredibly close in our minds.
Right. A fire isn't a type of red, but you can't think of one without the other.
Exactly. So the network isn't this rigid hierarchy. It's more fluid. The distance between ideas is about relatedness, not logic. The activation flows, well, like juice spilled on a table. It follows the easiest path.
Which brings us to how they could even measure this stuff. Because this is the 70s, you can't just put someone in an fMRI machine.
Right. All they had was reaction time. And that leads to this phenomena of semantic priming, which is probably one of the most solid findings in all of cognitive psychology.
I feel like this is something everyone experiences without knowing the name for it.
Oh, absolutely. The classic experiment is simple. I show you a word on a screen, the prime. Let's say doctor.
Okay.
Then I show you a second word, the target, maybe nurse. You'll recognize nurse as a real word much, much faster than if the first word had been something unrelated like bread.
Because doctor already warmed up that whole area of the network, nurse is already half awake.
The neighborhood is already activated. But the paper points to a really crucial detail here from a researcher named Neely. It's about how much control we have over this.
Automatic versus controlled processing.
Yes, and it all comes down to timing. The stimulus onset asynchrony, or SOA.
Which is just the gap, right? The time between the first word and the second.
Exactly. If that gap is long, like a second or so, people start using strategy. You see bird, and you consciously start expecting to see robin or eagle. You're trying to guess.
You're gaming the test.
You're using expectancy. But if the gap is really short, we're talking less than 250 milliseconds, there is no time for conscious thought.
So what you're seeing is the raw, automatic wiring of the brain.
That's it. Neely showed that at that speed, you can't stop it. The connection between bird and chicken fires before your conscious mind can even get involved.
That's a little bit wild. Our brain structure is faster than our willpower.
In a way, yes. But by the 90s, the field started to shift. Reaction times are great, but they only tell you that something is happening. They don't tell you how or where in the brain.
This is the neuro turn.
Yes, and we move from computer labs into hospitals. We start learning about memory by seeing how it breaks.
And the paper talks about this condition, category-specific impairment, CSI. And this is truly bizarre.
It's one of the great mysteries. You have patients who have had a stroke, for example, and they lose the ability to name living things. But they can still name tools perfectly.
It's that specific.
Unbelievably specific. You show them a picture of a tiger and they'll say, some kind of animal. You show them a hammer. That's a hammer. Instantly.
So the immediate conclusion is that the brain has like a zoo folder and a hardware store folder, and one of them got deleted.
That's one theory. Yeah, the domain-specific hypothesis. That evolution gave us specialized circuits for things that were important for survival animals, plants, other people.
But there's another theory mentioned that I found more convincing, the sensory functional theory.
It's a much more elegant explanation, I think. It says the brain doesn't organize by a label like animal. It organizes by attribute, by the kind of information.
How does that explain the animal versus tool thing?
Okay, well, think about how you tell a lion from a leopard. What's the key information?
It's what it looks like, mane versus spots. It's all visual.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
sensory. Now, how do you tell a hammer from a screwdriver?
By what you do with it. When you hit with, when you turn. It's about function.
Right. So the theory goes, living things are defined by sensory features, so they rely on the visual parts of your brain. Tools are defined by their function, so they rely on the motor parts of your brain.
So if a patient has damage to their visual cortex, they lose animals not because the animal file is gone, but because the very data they need to build that concept is corrupted.
Exactly. The knowledge is distributed. And this ties right into the sensory motor theory, the idea that to even think about a hammer, you have to slightly activate the part of your brain that knows how to swing a hammer.
Thinking is doing, in a way.
It's a very embodied idea. But we can't talk about memory breaking down without talking about the big ones, Alzheimer's and semantic dementia.
And the text is really clear that these are not the same thing at all. They break the system in totally different ways.
Very different. With Alzheimer's, the damage often starts in the hippocampus and medial temporal lobe. So the first thing to go is usually episodic memory.
You forget what you had for breakfast.
Right. But for a long time, you still know what breakfast is. But then later, the semantic memory starts to fade from the bottom up. You'll look at a specific bird, like a finch, and just call it bird. Then later, you'll see a bird and just call it animal.
You lose the specific details first and retreat to the general.
A perfect way to put it. Now, semantic dementia, or SD, is totally different. It's a type of frontotemporal dementia. These patients can often tell you in perfect detail what they did this morning. Their episodic memory is fine.
But they can't name the things they used.
They can't. They speak fluently, their grammar is intact, but the meanings of words just evaporate. They'll say, I used the hot water thing for the brown drink. They've lost the concept of kettle or tea.
And this gets to that big debate in the paper. Is it a storage problem or an access problem? Is the book burned? Or is the library door just locked?
A crucial question. With semantic dementia, the consensus is it's a storage deficit. The core concept is literally degrading. The book is burning.
But with Alzheimer's, it's not so clear.
It's more complicated. There's good evidence for access problems. The info's still in there somewhere, but the pathways to get to it are damaged. And this leads to one of the weirdest findings in the entire field.
Hyperpriming.
Hyperpriming. It sounds like a total paradox. The brain is damaged, but on some tests, it's reacting faster than a healthy brain.
How is that even possible?
The leading theory is called partial degradation. So imagine your brain's entry for tiger. It's got lots of features. Big cat, orange stripes. And your entry for lion has big cat, tan mane.
Okay. They're distinct.
Right. But in an Alzheimer's patient, the network starts to fray. The specific distinguishing features get lost. Stripes disappears from tiger. Mane disappears from lion.
So now, in their brain, the two concepts are almost identical. They're both just big cat.
Exactly. The concepts have blurred together. So when you prime them with the word tiger, the activation floods over to lion instantly because the boundary between them has dissolved. It's speed born from confusion.
That's incredible. It's like the map is getting so blurry that you jump from one city to the next without realizing there was a border.
A great analogy. And that idea of a map brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, the modern synthesis that tries to bring all this together. And it involves the Halle Berry neuron.
I remember when this study came out. It sounds like a joke, but it's very real science.
Right, it's landmark. So researchers, Quiroga and his team, were recording from single neurons in epilepsy patients. And they found one specific neuron that fired only when the patient saw Halle Berry.
And it wasn't just a photo, right? That's the crazy part.
That is the kicker. It fired for her photo, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But it also fired for the written words, Halle Berry.
Uh-huh.
It fired for a sketch of her. It even fired for a photo of her dressed as Catwoman.
So it wasn't responding to a pattern of pixels. It was responding to the abstract concept of Halle Berry.
Precisely. For a long time, the dominant idea was that knowledge was distributed, that Halle Berry was just a pattern across millions of neurons. This finding brought back the localist idea.
That there really is a specific address, a zip code in your brain where that one concept lives.
Or at least a convergence zone. That's the modern theory, conceptual topography.
Yeah.
The idea that your brain physically maps similar concepts close to each other.
So canary and bird aren't just connected by some abstract link. They might literally be next-door neighbors in your brain tissue.
Your mind has a physical geography, and we're finally starting to map it.
It's amazing. It brings us all the way back to Quillian in 1966. He drew a map of nodes and lines on paper because that's how he thought. And it turns out the brain might actually be organized that way.
It's a validation of that core intuition.
Yeah.
Our semantic memory isn't some random cloud of facts. It's a highly structured physical machine.
But it leaves me with this one kind of unsettling thought, and it's what I want to leave our listeners with. If we have specific neurons, or at least small, dedicated clusters for concepts like Halle Berry, what happens when I learn something new? When a new celebrity gets famous or a new piece of technology comes out?
Are you asking if we're physically growing new nodes?
Or repurposing old ones? If brain space is finite, is it a zero-sum game? Did I have to delete my memory of a third-grade classmate just to make room for the concept of ChatGPT?
It's the ultimate cognitive economy question, isn't it? Does the brain eventually just run out of space and post a dysful error?
Something to think about. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.
See you next time.